Going back to my childhood, I did not feel like I belonged to anywhere. In fact, that carried through much of my adult life. And the only place I felt like I belonged was on television. It was great, It was not about being the celebrity of it or anything like that. It was just about the fact I actually belong somewhere.
Welcome back. This is season 2 of the Create Up podcast. I'm truly excited today because my first guest back is a legit Canadian TV icon. You may know him best as the host of breakfast television on CTV for almost 30 years, Kevin Frankish. I really enjoyed this conversation because Kevin's thoughtful and funny, and I would say refreshingly honest on a range of topics, one of them being mental health. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but my dog right now is chewing a huge piece of wood, but I'm going to leave it in there because it's real. Anyway, much like myself, Kevin is no stranger to anxiety or depression. In fact, his latest project, a podcast called The Happy Molecule, is all about mental health. He talks to experts and very open human beings discussing a range of topics from bipolar disorder to suicide, which sounds heavy, and it is, but it's also necessary. And he approaches the subject with the right amount of empathy, curiosity, and respect. I really recommend you check out The Happy Molecule. You can get it anywhere you get your podcasts, and I think you're really going to enjoy our conversation as well. Kevin talks about his journey and his career, and well, I don't want to give away too much, but he shares some very compelling stories, and again, refreshingly honest. Is pretty awesome. But I don't want to give away too much, so I'm just going to launch into it. Here is my talk with Kevin Frankish. Kevin, Thank you so much for being here, dude.
It is my absolute pleasure, Will.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure as well. I've been really enjoying the Happy Molecule podcast you're working on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think you're probably best known as the breakfast television host, over 25 years as co-host of that TV show. So you have a lot of experience in the industry of hosting and interviewing and all this stuff. So it really is an honor to be speaking to someone.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's very kind.
Thank you. You're welcome, I should say. Slightly nervous, but I will say this. I'll say this. I don't know so much about the background of you as a person, like where you're from, like who was the kid that Kevin Frankish was that led him to this career that you've started.
Yeah. I guess perhaps that's why I went into something, that involved creativity is I don't really have any roots. I was born in New Westminster in Vancouver. We moved when I was 2. We didn't have a lot of money, so we moved a lot of times up in Northern Ontario and North Bay and several areas there. Never really having a chance to settle down per se. It wasn't really until I was in like the latter part of elementary school that we sort of stayed in one place finally. But by then, I hadn't established any close friendships or any roots or any real traditions.
Wow. Do you think that not having roots socially at that young age kind of gave you this superpower of building rapport with people?
I don't know. You know what? That's a really good, interesting question. Maybe. Maybe it's the fact of always being curious and wondering what's going on and being open to talking and listening to anyone. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I know I switched schools in high school and I found it was really, really difficult, even just doing it once. Mm-hmm. Kind of redefine yourself.
But you did get to see, and now that I think about it, you get to see so many different facets of life. It's not so one-dimensional. Perhaps that's something. Maybe we've got a scientific study going on here.
I think we do. I won't. I won't take all the credit.
Okay, we can split the Pulitzer. Yes.
Okay. Oh, great. I was also going to say I love all these awards behind you. I was referencing that before the interview. I think it's awesome. You have.
Yeah, those are all what came in the frames when I bought them. So it was just need some background. That's good. Yeah.
Nice. But I think when you started with breakfast television, that to me is a really interesting career, a really interesting situation to be in because it's such a huge commitment. 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. and you just sort of become known in the city as Kevin Frankish.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
You know what? Growing up, one of my absolute favorite shows was Andy of Mayberry. I always wanted to live in Mayberry. I always wanted to live in a town where everybody knows who you are. You know everybody. Sitting on a porch on a Sunday afternoon, just doing nothing, having some lemonade, but just that kind of lifestyle in which you belong.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to my childhood, I did not feel like I belonged to anywhere. In fact, that carried through much of my adult life. And the only place I felt like I belonged was on television.
Mm-hmm.
Not for anything to do with a notoriety or anything like that, but because I could walk down the street and someone would say, "Hey, Kev," like just like that. And so it was great. It was not about being the celebrity of it or anything like that. It was just about the fact I actually belong somewhere.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. You were on a public stage as Kevin Frankish, as versus like, an actor might have a role. You don't really know the actor, but we know Kevin, and, we've known you for a very long time. And it kind of makes sense that you would be at home and that you would want to spend so much time in that world. Cause I would think that must be, like, did you ever feel just drained, like having to be on TV that much?
Oh, of course. Yeah. There were some times, but then I just sort of mailed it in. So, I could pull back once in a while, but for the most part, once the juices get flowing, I just want to keep, I want more, I want to do something different. And one of the things too, when you get into that point where you start feeling drained is, okay, let me tell you about Moses Znaimer. Mm-hmm. Moses Znaimer, the creator of City TV, creator of so many wonderful institutions. Okay, he was a quirky gentleman. He is a quirky gentleman, but extremely creative. And one of the things that would happen is when you were feeling drained, and it's just like, I have too much to do. This is too much. You go up to his office and you say, "Moses, I'm drained." And you talk, and you'd leave the office, and do you know what his cure for that was? It was to give you more work, and you were happy about it. Like, honestly, You left there, and he said, "Well, why don't you do this, this, and this?" And "That's a good idea." And you left, and you're halfway down the hall, and you say, "Wait a minute, he just gave me more work." But that was it, right? The one thing people forget is that if you're feeling drained and you're feeling like life is getting routine and mundane or overwhelming, find something to do. Like, honestly, find something to do. Yeah,
that is great. I suffer from some anxiety from time to time, and I find sometimes the best cure is to get busier, or if you have a problem in your world, make your world bigger.
Okay, so you don't suffer from it. You live with it.
No, I don't. You live with it. I definitely live with it.
That may sound like just, oh, come on, stop being so politically correct. No, there's a difference. Now, people can suffer with disorders, mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, bipolar, anything like that. They can suffer from it, or they can choose to live with it. And it sounds like, from what you were saying, you're living with it rather than suffering from it.
Oh yeah, completely. I would definitely say I've been blessed, like in my 30s, to start. You learn a lot of strategies to deal with anxiety, and but I've noticed that it's really declined. Like the more to be honest, I actually just started taking anxiety medicine as well, a low dose, and that's helped a lot.
I take
way
it
more
too.
Creative. Okay, great. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. But that's actually one thing I like about your podcast is you reframe mental illness, for example, and you go to all these amazing places. When did you become interested in wanting to talk about mental illness? I know you kind of touched on it a bit at BT, and that you also, you had some experiences with anxiety that you were forthcoming about, and which was awesome. You were just
Well, it was 2006. And I had what turned out later to be a panic attack on the air, and I went home.
Wow.
Like right there, I said, "Guys, I can't stay." And you know what? It's the thing with anxiety attacks and that is you don't know if you've never had one before and no one's described it to you, you don't know what it is. And so I went home, driving home, crying. I thought it was all over because that's how overwhelming that feeling was, that there's no way you're going to go back on TV, my friend. That was the last time you've ever been on television. What am I going to do? And so it started then. Finally found out it was an anxiety attack. Later on in the day, I went to several doctors and talked to experts in that. And so I came back and I felt, there was no other reason other than I just sort of had to explain to the audience, why did I all of a sudden disappear yesterday? So I said, you know what? I had what turned out to be an anxiety attack, a panic attack.
Yeah.
And then I described it. And this is prior to social media. So I got, our main communication was email with viewers. I was very open with my email account. And I got 1,500 emails immediately that day, over the day, saying, me too. I thought I was the only one. Is that what it's called? I didn't know that. And it really indicated to me, wait a minute, there is a silent majority out there of people who live with any sort of mental health disorder that, first of all, think they're the only one.
Yep.
And second of all, are too embarrassed to talk about it because of the stigma. Screw that. You know what? It's like having a cold. It's like getting the flu. It is something that's happening in your body that you can't control right now. And so why not talk about it? If I had a cold right now and I was sniffling, I'd say, oh, pardon me. Well, I have a cold. I'm a little under the weather. So what is the real difference saying, you know what? I have depression. Yeah, and I do. I have generalized anxiety disorder and severe depressive disorder. I have that. It's not that I'm proud of it, but I'm not embarrassed by it.
Yeah. And well, I noticed with anxiety, like it's hard to control because it seems to hijack a part of your brain that is not necessarily logical or rational. It feels like it's hijacking this almost like that fight or flight side sometimes, especially with panic. And I've been in the situation too. I remember meeting my girlfriend's family. Like we were just hanging out and I was like, oh man, this relationship might be kaput because I think I'm going to run out of this room. This is going to be very awkward. I talked myself down, but you can try talking yourself down, but it just connects to this deeper part of you that's sort of beyond rational thought. And I think that could be very scary too. You feel that feeling of being out of control.
Yeah. And what you have to do in situations like that. And if I could offer some advice to you and to your listeners, the important thing about anxiety is learning what you can and can't control. There are some times you can't control an anxiety attack. There are some other times you can. So you learn what you can and can control. So now let's say you're going into an anxiety attack. And once one starts, you can't stop it. I mean, it's almost impossible because it's actually a chemical reaction of hormones in your body that are making their way through because it feels that you need them. Your body's doing what it's supposed to do, by the way. It is doing what it's supposed to do. And that's why I kind of have a hard time with the word disorder because what's happening is happening for a reason. But the best thing to do in a situation where an anxiety attack is coming on is open up about it and tell people around you, hey, I'm having an anxiety attack. And they're going to say, what? You don't look like it. Yeah. You're going to notice a very funny thing happens. You start controlling it. Because why? Because you are telling someone about it, you're describing it, and you're looking at it from all sides. Well, what's it feel like? You know what? It's kind of a hard feeling to describe, and it's a very hard feeling to describe, but I feel A, B, and C. Oh, and again, and if someone ever talks to you about this, the best thing to do is listen and ask a couple of questions. That's it. Don't try and solve it. Don't say, oh, well, let me get you a cold cloth. Let me get you the, no, tell me about it. You're going to notice that the effects of it are far less severe. An anxiety attack is like a garden hose that is running. And you grab the garden hose. So the, whatever's happening is flowing through and it's going to flow through. So, but you don't want it to. So what we do is we grab that garden hose and we squeeze it and because we don't want it to go through. It's like suppressing a sneeze, right?
Yeah.
What happens when you suppress a sneeze? It just is, it blows up. It gets even bigger. So you're holding this. So what's going on? The pressure is building in behind. And as long as the tap's still on, it's not going back up the tap. It's coming out no matter what happens. No matter what happens, it's coming out. And if And if it finally has enough pressure to build up, it comes out hard, and it would hurt. I mean, if you put your hand on the other side of it, it would hurt your hand. The best thing to do is not to squeeze that hose. The best thing to do is it's going to flow through.
Let it flow. Yeah.
It's like turbulence on an airplane. It scares the hell out of people. But except in one or two extremely rare incidents, turbulence has never brought an aircraft down. It's bumpy. That's all it is. Now, there are some extreme cases, of course, and we hear about those in the news, but they don't happen very often either, of it dropping 100 feet or something like that, or 1,000 feet.
Yeah, totally.
But you know what? So what do you do when turbulence hits? Sometimes you grab the person beside you or you squeeze on. It's not going to stop it. The best thing to do is just say, it's turbulence. Can I have another drink, please? And it comes to an end.
Yeah,
so
completely.
It's the same thing with an anxiety attack is you tell people about it.
Yeah.
You know what? The other interesting thing too is experience it. Let it happen and say, what does this feel like? Because I need to know what it feels like. I'm tired of saying it's kind of hard to describe. I want to describe it. So where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my stomach? Do I feel it in my chest? Do I feel it in my head? Does it seem like water? Does it seem like wind? What is it?
Yeah.
And so you're taking control, and all of a sudden you go from suffering from it to living with it. And
I love that.
It becomes a little bit more normal. And so you may have one and not even notice it in the future just because, because and if I couldn't, I'm sorry if I'm going on.
No, that's okay. Sorry. Yes. Keep going. I want to hear this.
So essentially what's happening is we have an autonomous nervous system, and that's what's responsible for, taking care of us when we're not paying attention. It blinks our eyes, it beats our heart, it keeps our lungs going and our breath going. It happens all day. So within that system is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight system. It is the system that says, oh my gosh, there's a bear at the end of this path and he's looking at me and I think he's going to attack. Sympathetic system, what do I do? So your sympathetic nervous system speeds up your heart rate in case you have to run or fight. It takes blood from areas of your body that are not a priority and moves it around your body to your muscles, to anything you might need, again, to run or to fight. Your pulse rate goes up. You can break into a sweat. You become extremely narrow focused because you need to your body, your sympathetic nervous system says you need to focus on that. So you need to either focus on the bear where you're going to hit it, or you're going to focus on the path that you're going to run. So that's what's happening. So then the parasympathetic so the bear walks off. The parasympathetic nervous system then kicks in, says, oh, bear's gone. Okay, blood, go back to where you're supposed to be. Heart rate, I need you to slow down. Let's stop the sweating. And so and they work wonderfully together. The problem is that we have not been taught about stress and anxiety and what it is and what causes it and what the feelings are really like. And this is why we need to start in childhood teaching kids what feelings are. We don't.
Oh, absolutely.
So what happens is our sympathetic nervous system kicks in because so we've got, I've got a homework assignment due next week and I'm still not done. So your sympathetic nervous system says, oh, you're in trouble. There's a crisis. There's something that is possibly life-threatening. Okay, and it goes through all the rigmarole, but you're still worrying about it. And the parasympathetic nervous system just sits back and says, oh, okay, you're still worrying about it, so it must still be there. So I'm not going to kick in. So your heart rate's going to go like that. And so what happens when you describe it, when you look at it from all sides, or when you do a breathing exercise, is you are taking the place of your parasympathetic nervous system and kicking it into gear, saying, hey, get off your ass and start slowing down my heart rate, please, because I'm going to do it right now, but you got to take over. And so that's why breathing exercises, when done properly, are so incredibly effective.
Oh, for sure. And even the deep breathing that comes from like heavy exercise, I find works really well. As well.
Because you're the one that is controlling it. You're not, you're not saying to your system, okay, you kick in when you think it's right. So when you look at it, and that's why I said before, to call it a disorder, I think is a misnomer, because your body's doing what it's supposed to be doing, exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's our thought process that is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that's where we have to retrain ourselves. And that's why cognitive behavior therapy is so effective. Pills are good.
For sure.
They'll stabilize you and they'll allow you to do this. But
Yeah.
they're not the answer, and they shouldn't be the answer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I held it for a long time before doing them. I just found right now, I'm just really thankful for them, because I just find my creativity and my production is going up. And often, I do CBT and I do different things, but I found there was still a lot of mental gymnastics I was doing not to over focus on a problem, or I'd have a sleepless night over, even something as simple as an audition. And I was like, well, I'm not sleeping. And I'm like that. And then the audition would go fine. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not sleeping. So I've only been doing these meds for a couple months, but it's just been so nice to have more bandwidth in my head. Yeah. And I may go off them. Yeah. Well, I will probably, I might go off them in a couple months or maybe a year or whatever.
If I could, but do that only with a psychiatrist.
Oh, 1,000%.
The problem with mental health medication is, we've created these medicines and people go on them. We have not created a way yet for people to go off them properly. There are so many side effects that happen. And so if you're going to do it, and I give this advice to everybody, just don't do it alone. Just demand, I want to be off these. And then just go off them with the proper advice, or else you could really screw yourself up. Yeah,
I'll definitely have to, when I get to that bridge, I'll have to consider all that, because I know it's definitely not something to be trifled with. Just like willy-nilly, just jumping off the pills. But it's just been really great, because I'm 36 now, and this is my first real honest effort with it. And I found it's actually helped with other things, like not worrying about things you shouldn't even worry about, like setting boundaries. It's actually helped me set boundaries a lot easier, which has really improved my relationships. So I'm such a huge fan of not being resistant to medicine, because I think I was resistant forever.
So was I.
Do you think you helped normalize talks about mental illness? And starting back in 2006, do you think you were kind of one of the just people like that were really known, that were now going, okay, like, let's be real. Like, let's stop pretending everything's happy-go-lucky. Let's have some real, honest conversations, even though I'm on network TV and it's not necessarily something you commonly see on network TV. I always think of everyone smiling and laughing and da-da-da-da-da. But then you're like, oh, by the way, that was a panic attack. And I'm sure as that went on, as your career went on at CTV, were you bringing more awareness to that sort of stuff? Or was that just sort of a couple months in 2006? Like, I'm just curious.
No, I carried that on afterwards when I realized how many people out there wanted to talk about it. And I'm just one of many people who are talking about it openly and in a very public forum. So it's just a matter, let's get some conversations going. That's the start, right? That is what we need to do more than anything else right now. I think our priorities right now are talking a lot about it and learning to listen to others and not trying to solve it. This is something I get asked a lot, is I have a loved one who I live with and I can't stand it. They've got these panic attacks and they've got this and they tell me about it. What do I say? What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing you do is you don't try and solve it. You just say, oh, what's that like? You don't know how much you're helping that person by doing that, because you're causing them to do exactly what we've been talking about. And that is looking at it. And once you recognize it and see it, you're able to better find ways to control it. So just by listening, instead of saying, I'm going to go get you some water, or, hey, why don't you sit down? Why don't you don't, just listen. I interviewed a gentleman, his name is Kevin Breaks. He was a California Highway Patrol officer. His part of his patrol area was the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And of course, as we know, the Golden Gate Bridge is sadly a magnet for those wanting to take their lives. And so he became, I guess out of necessity, an expert on, and this is another misnamed thing, and that is he became an expert in talking people down. You don't talk someone down. I'm going to explain why. So he became extremely successful. He now runs a company, and part of what he does is he goes around talking about anti-suicide measures and about it. So he became an expert, and quite often he'd talk to someone for an hour and a half, and they'd come back over the rail. And I said, Kevin, what was it that you said to them that you found more common than anything? When they came over and they said, here's what you said to me that changed my mind. I said, what did you say? He says, almost without fail, they said to him each time, it's because you listened.
Yeah.
Not anything he said, he listened. And that's what they wanted. Because if you ever go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a psychotherapist, anything like that, you'll notice they don't do a lot of talking. They guide you, because the answers that we seek are up here in our head, in our own head.
Yeah.
And once we start reasoning through, we go, aha, I see. The reason I was having anxiety is because of, I've got this thing happening next week, an audition, something like that. And I was thinking about that. And I realize now there's nothing I can do about that. And so you talk yourself through it. So if someone is standing on the brink of the bridge, again, sympathetic nervous system has extremely narrowed. They can't see the peripheries, right? They can't see the things that are good about their life or the reasons they need to stay alive. All they can see is there's a problem here. The only solution I have is to take my life.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so by listening, by just listening, you broaden that up. And all of a sudden I'd say, oh my gosh, I have kids. Oh my gosh, I have parents. I have friends. Maybe this is a problem I can actually solve. So yeah, listening is something we need to do.
That's amazing. And it's interesting. His approach was to listen, and how effective that is, because the person speaking themselves off the bridge, I'm sure he could go and grab them and keep them from jumping, but they have to want to stay alive. You know what I mean? He could
they'll
save
be back
them
tomorrow.
They'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah.
That reminds me of your two-parter on suicide. And you spoke with Mark Hannick, who had attempted multiple times to do it. And then he turned his life around. He's reframing how you think about suicide. It's so important.
Let me use, that's a great example. What stopped Mark from, he was on a bridge, Mark Hannick, and I invite people to look him up. He was on a bridge, and a small crowd had started gathering. This was out in the Atlantic provinces. And some of them were yelling at him, well, jump already. And so he was like, but then an unidentified gentleman was behind him. And he talked to him. He listened to him. He asked him questions, and Mark just decided on his own, to come back. And he remembers that. And he actually met that gentleman years later, because the guy just disappeared.
Yeah, phenomenal story.
Yeah. I invite people to look it up. But again, there's that example of just listening. Let's talk this out. We got all the time in the world. Let's talk this out.
It was so cool. They find each other later, and I think he's the godfather of Mark's kids now. It's like, it's so insane.
Yeah.
When I was listening to that story, that's one of my favorite interviews that you've done. And one of my favorite things, when he talks about the two voices, the one voice is like, hey, jump, like from the crowd. And then there's the stranger who saves him and who's sort of listening to him and, the optimistic side. It almost reminded me of Mark, like, it was almost like a metaphor for like what goes in the head of someone who's considering that choice. Like, there's the guy telling him to jump, but there's probably way louder guys in his head, obviously telling him to jump. And then it was so interesting.
Let's equate this to your heart and defibbing a heart. So we've all seen the TV shows where they take the paddles and they shock the heart, and that And they called it defibrillation. So defibrillation, they're stopping a fibrillation. So your heart is going like this. Part of your autonomous nervous system, by the way, is what guides your heart, what causes it to beat with regularity. That's part of our. So if it goes wrong, your heart does some weird things.
Yeah.
So so it goes into fibrillations. We think that when we see these paddles, and it's very common to say we're going to restart the heart. So they put the paddles on, electricity goes through, bang, you've restarted the heart. No, you're not. They're stopping the heart. That electrical shock stops the heart, because then your nervous system, it's saying to your nervous system, hey, get back to work. And so then the hope is you go back into regular rhythm, and it's like, instead of going, you go boom, boom, because it recognizes, it's like, oh, good, okay. So if someone has suicidal ideations, their mind is fibrillating. So we need something to stop it, first of all, from doing that. I'm not suggesting electrical shock treatment, although they still use it somewhat to these days. Still some more research, but for the most part, we need to stop. Just stop and start over. That's it.
Yeah, completely. What have been some of these responses you've been getting for these topics you're covering? Like, can you share the feedback you got on that suicide episode, or by like any episode that is you want to share?
You know what? And especially when it comes to suicide, I've had a few comments, emails, and messages from people saying that I've saved their lives.
Yeah,
and it can be out of something, totally, like, not even on a suicide show, just maybe something I've said. And that's why conversation is so important, because we never know what's going to trigger something. We don't know over the last little bit that you and I have been talking what resonates with someone. It may be something you and I didn't even think of,
Yeah.
So it's nice. It can be a little bit scary, because you worry, I want to make sure that what I say doesn't trigger someone. And this is kind of a something that we had a false belief. There's a myth for many, many years. Never say the word suicide to someone. Never mention it on air. We were told never to mention it. And then I started mentioning it. I said, screw this, because I'd read some research saying you are not going to trigger someone to take their own life by mentioning, are you thinking about suicide? You're not. So, in fact, it's quite the opposite. You have opened up a conversation and shone a little light into their very dark world.
Yeah.
So if you have a suspicion that someone possibly is thinking about taking their own life, it's okay to say to them, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about taking your own life? Are you thinking about suicide? You know?
Yeah.
It's okay to say that. Now, you want to get them help, by the way. This is not something you need to do on your own. You can, if you're just like right there at the moment, yes, it's important. But if you know someone who may have some suicidal ideations, you need to get them help.
Absolutely.
And there is so much available. And this is a chance for me to educate here, because we try and do this as many times as possible. And that is, you don't commit suicide. Stop saying you commit suicide. You commit a murder. You commit robbery. You commit assault. Those are crimes.
Yeah.
You die by suicide. You take your life by suicide. It's not a crime. It is not.
That's interesting. You don't. So you die of suicide. You don't commit suicide.
Yeah. And because you're not. I don't want to say you're not doing anything wrong, but yeah, you're not. You're doing something you feel is the only way out.
Yeah.
And it's not a coward's way out. All right. It's not selfish. It is, for some people, the only thing they can think of right now, because everything else is so overwhelming and it's short-circuited. Everything inside of them, all they can think of is they want this pain to stop. And that's what happens.
Yeah. Wow. And this can happen to people of all walks of life, but because we're also like a show, like we talk a lot for artists and things, why do you think that there seems to be this connection between mental illness and artists? Is that just a cliche?
It is something that's still being studied, and it's still something that's inconclusive. So there's questions like, are creative people more prone to mental health issues, or do mental health issues create creative people? For the most part, the research is leaning towards creative people tend to be more live with mental illness, especially bipolar, especially visual artists. Not so much dancers, directors, things like that. Not so much them.
Why bipolar and why visual artists?
Because bipolar is, we hear that term. A lot of us don't understand what it is. Bipolar is just that, bi, meaning two, polar, opposites. So we go from extreme high to extreme low, depression to manic, manic to depression, and it can happen in seconds. And when you think about being creative and when you're doing something, if you're acting, if you are drawing or painting, you get really excited. Oh, I love this. This is great. This is great.
Yeah.
No one's going to like that. I don't think it's as good as I thought it was. Oh, someone says, that's fantastic. That's beautiful. Oh, and you're back up high again. And then someone else says, oh, it's all right. And
oh, wow. You're describing like every artist I know right now.
You live and die by people's thoughts about you.
Oh my God.
And it's not just a matter of in the middle, it's a matter of they love me or they hate me, So it really lends itself towards that. And all the more reason that you need to learn how to live with it and control it.
How did you learn to live with it? Because, the fact that, like we were saying from before, Kevin Frankish, public facing, it's Kevin, you know what I mean? It's not Kevin playing the role of somebody else. It's like direct feedback does it feel like it's very difficult? Like if someone says, oh, I'm not a fan of him, or I don't like his show. Like, did you go through a process of?
First of all, Will, no one says they're not a fan of me. Do you understand?
Oh no, hypothetically, I don't think anyone has ever said
okay,
that.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Of course. Yeah, no. I mean, other people.
There were two particular things that were watershed moments for me. One was all those emails I got the very first time.
Sure.
It said to me, and this is something that I really learned from that. It said to me, you're not alone. And sometimes when I say that, I found the more I said that to people who have some sort of mental disorder, the more I said it to them, the more they were a little bit relieved. Oh, okay, I'm not alone. Yeah. For instance, let's go back to the sneeze. So let's say in your entire life, you never sneezed, ever. And you've never heard a sneeze. You've never even heard the word sneeze. And you're by yourself one day and you sneeze. Now think about a sneeze. A sneeze is a very violent act. Mm-hmm. I believe at some point your heart skips a beat or whatever. I mean, but it's a violent act. Mm-hmm. However, we don't think anything of it. But if you had never done it before and you were by yourself, first of all, I don't want to tell anyone. I'm going to keep, and it happens, a couple of days later and a few days after that. And finally you tell someone and they say, oh yeah, that's a sneeze. I get them all the time. Oh, I'm not alone. It's not just me. This is something that is, for all intents and purposes, normal. So that's important. So for me, that was one moment. The other moment was, and I have no idea where I heard it, but in all I would always, my ears would perk up whenever there was an interview about depression. I would do a lot of reading about it, and I do not remember where I first heard this. And someone had said that the way they had conquered anxiety attacks and panic attacks was to stand your ground and let it come. And that's all I remember, just that line.
That's awesome.
Well, I got interested and I said, okay, well, why did that help that person? So I thought more and more about it. And it's like I described to you before, letting it happen, just standing your ground and saying to a panic attack, come on, Come on at me.
That's so fearless. It's so fearless, and we're talking about fear. We're talking about anxiety, and it's such a fearless act. That's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's important. So you're not alone, and just stand your ground. It's like turbulence on a plane. It will pass, and it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to kill you. It won't hurt you. We think a lot of times panic attacks manifest themselves in a way similar to heart attacks, and that's why quite often you go into an emergency room and the first thing they do is hook you up to machines to make sure your heart's okay. So yeah, it's okay to stand your ground. A third thing that I've learned, and in fact, this is something I've just sort of come up with in the last year or two, or a realization. I didn't come up with it. A realization. It says, okay, well, what's the opposite of depression? What's the opposite of anxiety? And to me, the opposite is a 4-letter word. It's hope. When you have depression and anxiety, you have little hope. But if you can convince yourself there's hope, tomorrow can be better. Next week can be better. The audition I'm doing next week can be a success. Scientists or researchers have found that we spend 80 to 85% of our day in negative thoughts. It's just, it's the way we learn as humans. It always has been, is negativity. Ouch, that's hot. I better not touch fire again. Okay, so negativity has been a stimulus for us learning. But we've taken it now in our modern world, in our modern society, to the nth degree. We worry about everything. So 85% of everything you think of every day, 85% is negative.
Wow.
Out of that, researchers went on to dissect it further. 90% of all the negative thoughts, hope you're following me, 90%, in fact, almost all of the negative thoughts never happen. So think about that. You're spending 85% of your day thinking about something that will probably never happen. So I would really like people to think about the other 15%. If you're getting a negative thought, throw a positive thought in there. Just counter it with that. Oh, that audition is it's gonna be tough. You know what? I could do really well on that. It's okay. Throw it and do that every once in a while. That's cognitive behavior therapy. Sooner or later, it just starts becoming natural. You start believing it more. Even if you don't believe it, even if you don't say to yourself, oh, Will, I think you're gonna do really well. You can do really well next week. Okay, I don't believe that, but you know what? I'm gonna say it. Yeah. Sooner or later, it becomes fact. So there you go.
Thank you. That is an awesome. Well, you've given a lot of awesome advice and a lot of deep insights, man. And I thank you tremendously for just being able to have the courage and to pursue. You've been pursuing this for so long now, with the happy molecule, and it just seems like this wonderful calling, and thank you for doing what you do, man. It probably almost came out of nowhere that you had the anxiety attack, but it just led, boom, to this path, man. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, I mean, I guess it's sort of like as a kid, you paint a picture, you don't think much of it, and then all of a sudden people say, "Wow, well, you have a real knack for that." So I guess I found I have a knack for being open, if there's such a thing as that. Nice. But yeah, and to everyone out there, you're not alone. Stand your ground, and hope is possible. It is possible.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend.